Mussolini ruled Italy with an iron hand for more than 20 years. When he tried to escape in Italy at the end of World War II, he was caught right away and killed by a firing squad near Lake Como. But Mussolini's death did not make his enemies happy. They wanted a symbolic punishment for the pain he caused. After he was killed, Mussolini's body was taken to Piazzale Loreto in Milan, which is where anti-fascists had been killed before on his orders. People let out years of anger by defiling his body here. People spit smoked pot and shot at Mussolini's body, which was then hung upside down from a gas station in a scene that looked eerily like a slaughterhouse. Mussolini and Petacci's brutally killed bodies became signs of Italy's freedom from fascism. Even though Mussolini's body was placed in a grave that wasn't marked, it continued to get attention. Later, fascists found and moved his body in secret. It was then given back to his family so that he could be buried in his hometown in 1957. His cruel policies and Italy's long, painful fight for freedom are still remembered as terrible acts of terror that left a terrible mark on history. His life, death, and the fact that his body was savaged showed how much hate he caused and how badly his rule affected Italy. Inside Benito Mussolini's rise to power. Benito Mussolini took control of Italy thanks to both the pen and the sword. Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883, in Dovia di Predapio. He was smart and interested from a very young age. To be exact, he wanted to be a teacher at first, but quickly changed his mind. In spite of this, he read a lot of the works of famous European thinkers such as Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, Immanuel Kant, and Benedict de Spinoza. In his 20s, he ran a number of newspapers that were basically ads for his more and more extreme political ideas. He believed that violence was the best way to bring about change, especially when it came to the safety of workers and the growth of trade unions. The young writer and firebrand was arrested and jailed several times for encouraging violence in this way. In 1903, he helped organize a violent workers' strike in Switzerland. Because of how far-right his ideas were, the Socialist Party kicked him out and he quit their newspaper. Mussolini then took matters into his own hands. In late 1914, with World War I newly underway, he founded a newspaper called The People of Italy. In it, he outlined the major political philosophies of nationalism and militarism and violent extremism that would direct his later life. "From today onward, we are all Italians and nothing but Italians," he once said. "Now that steel has met steel, one single cry comes from our hearts: Viva l'Italia!" The transformation into a brutal dictator. Benito Mussolini started Italy's National Fascist Party in 1921. Before that, he worked as a young writer and as a sharpshooter in World War I. With more and more followers and black-clad paramilitary squads ready to attack, the fascist leader, calling himself Il Duce, quickly became known for his fiery speeches that were fueled by his increasingly violent political views. Hundreds of people were killed by these black-shirt groups that formed all over northern Italy and set fire to government buildings. In 1922, Mussolini himself called for a general workers' strike and a march on Rome. It wasn't long before Italy's leaders had to give up power to the fascists when 30,000 fascist troops came into the city and called for a revolution. King Victor Emmanuel III made Mussolini Prime Minister on October 29, 1922. The youngest person to ever hold the job, and his statements, policies, and views on the world had reached more people than ever before. During the 1920s, Mussolini changed Italy to look like himself. By the middle of the 1930s, he was really trying to show his power outside of Italy. Late in 1935, he led his army into Ethiopia, and after a short war that Italy won, made the country a colony of Italy. Some historians even say this was the first event that led to World War II. When it did start, Mussolini was like never before on the world stage. How Il Duce entered World War II. Benito Mussolini did nothing while Hitler invaded France, 5 years after Ethiopia was attacked. Il Duce thought that Italy should be fighting the French, but there was no question that the German military was bigger, better equipped, and led better. He could only watch, fully support Hitler, and then start a war against Germany's enemies. It was now very bad for Mussolini. With only Germany on his side, he went to war with the rest of the world. Also, Il Duce was becoming more aware of how badly equipped Italy's military was. He needed more than just angry words and angry speeches. Mussolini's regime could not work without a strong army. As soon as possible, Italy sent its military to invade Greece. The invasion failed, and the war was unpopular at home. People there were still unemployed and hungry, which made them angry. Mussolini would have been overthrown by a coup in 1941 if Hitler hadn't stepped in with his army. The downfall of Benito Mussolini. The King and the Grand Council removed Benito Mussolini from power in July 1943. He was under a lot of pressure at home because of the stress of the war and rebellion within his own army. The Allies took back northern Africa from Italy, and they were now in charge of Sicily as they got ready to attack Italy. Il Duce's time was almost up. Mussolini was caught and put in jail by forces loyal to the Italian king. His own son-in-law Gian Galeazzo Ciano was one of the people who got rid of him and arrested him. After that, the resistance locked him up in a hotel in the mountains of Abruzzi that was far away from everything. At first, the German troops said there would be no rescue, but they quickly changed their minds. Gliders were crash-landed into the side of the mountain behind the hotel by German troops. Mussolini was then freed and flown back to Munich to meet with Hitler. The Führer talked Il Duce into making northern Italy, which is where it all started, into a fascist state with Milan as its capital. That way, Mussolini could stay in power and Hitler could keep a friend. Mussolini came back victorious and kept putting down his opponents. The Fascist Party punished people who had different opinions, sent people with non-Italian names back to their home country, and kept a tight grip on the north. German troops helped the Blackshirts keep things in order. All of this fear reached a peak on August 10, 1944. In Milan's Piazzale Loreto, fascists arrested 15 people they thought were anti-fascist fighters, or people who supported the new Italy. Soldiers from the German SS watched as Mussolini's men shot and killed them. Partisans started calling this area the Square of the 15 Martyrs from that point on. In another 8 months, the people of Milan would get their revenge on Mussolini, in an act that was equally as savage. How did Benito Mussolini die? The war in Europe was over by the spring of 1945, and Italy was no longer a country. As the Allies moved forward, the South was in ashes. Many people thought that Il Duce was to blame for the damage done to the land. But putting Il Duce in jail was no longer a good idea. There were Allied troops all around Hitler in Berlin, but Italy didn't want to take any more chances with its own future. On April 25, 1945, Benito Mussolini decided to meet with people who were against fascism in the Palace of Milan. Here he learned that Germany had started talks to get Mussolini to give up, which made him very angry. Clara Petacci, his lover, and he ran away with her to the north, where they joined a German convoy going to the Swiss border. Mussolini thought that this was the only way he could spend the rest of his life in exile. He was wrong. Il Duce tried to hide himself in the column by putting on a Nazi helmet and coat, but he was caught right away. His brown eyes, bald head, and deeply set jaw made him easy to spot. Over the past 25 years, Mussolini's face had been on posters all over the country, giving him a cult-like following and making him instantly recognizable. Now, it was coming back to haunt him. Partisans quickly took Mussolini and Petacci to a faraway field, because they were afraid that the Nazis would try to save Mussolini again. The next morning, the partisans told the couple to stand against a brick wall near the gate to Villa Belmonte, which is near Lake Como in Italy. A firing squad then opened fire on them, killing them. When Mussolini died, the last thing he said was, "No." Mussolini was very close to reaching Switzerland, which is right next door to the vacation town of Como. He would have been free after a few more miles. But Mussolini's violent life ended just like that. But just because Mussolini was dead doesn't mean his story is over. Still not happy, supporters rounded up 15 people they thought were fascists and killed them in the same way. Marcello Petacci, Clara's brother, was also shot and killed while swimming in Lake Como to get away, and the angry mobs weren't finished yet. How Mussolini's corpse was mutilated after his death. There was a big truck crash in Milan's Square of the 15 Martyrs the night after Benito Mussolini died. A group of 10 guys dumped 18 bodies out of the back without any care. They were Mussolini's, the Petaccis, and the 15 people who were thought to be fascists. It was the same place where 15 anti-fascists were brutally killed by Mussolini's men a year before, and the people of Milan knew about that link. They then took out their anger and rage from the previous 20 years on the bodies. Bad veggies were thrown at the dictator's dead body. Then they began to kick and beat it. One woman thought Il Duce wasn't really dead. There were 5 close-range shots fired at his head. 1 bullet was fired for each son she lost in Mussolini's failed war. This made the crowd even more excited. A person grabbed Mussolini by the armpit so that everyone could see his body. It wasn't enough still. The bodies were hung upside down from the iron girders of a gas station on April 29, 1945. Ropes were tied to the feet of the dead. The crowd yelled, "Higher! Higher! We can't see! String them up! To the hooks! Like pigs!" The dead bodies did, in fact, look like meat hanging in a slaughterhouse. Mussolini had his mouth open wide. He couldn't keep his mouth shut even after he died. Clara's eyes were fixed on something far away. The aftermath of Mussolini's death. A lot of people quickly heard that Benito Mussolini had died. Hitler heard about it on the radio and vowed that his body would not be disrespected in the same way that Mussolini's was. Hitler's close friends and family said he told them, "This will never happen to me." In his final will, scrawled on a piece of paper, Hitler said, "I do not wish to fall into the hands of an enemy who requires a new spectacle organized by the Jews for the amusement of their hysterical masses." Just a few days after Mussolini died, on May 1st, Hitler killed himself and his. As Soviet troops closed in, his friends and family burned his body. The story of Benito Mussolini's death wasn't over yet. In the afternoon of the day, the bodies were sacramentally buried. Both American troops and a Catholic priest showed up. They took the bodies to the nearby hospital, where a photographer from the US Army took pictures of the horrible bodies of Mussolini and Petacci. Finally, they were buried in a Milan cemetery in a grave that wasn't marked. But the place wasn't a secret for very long. On April 8, 1946, fascists dug up Il Duce's body. It was written on a note that the fascist party would no longer stand for the cannibal slurs made by human dregs organized in the Communist Party. After 4 months, the body was found in a church near Milan. It stayed there for 11 years, until Adine Zoli, the Prime Minister of Italy, gave the bones to Mussolini's wife. In the right way, she buried her husband in the family crypt in Predappio. That's not the end of the story about how Mussolini died. The US military gave Mussolini's family a piece of his brain in 1966. A piece of his brain was cut out by the military to check for syphilis. No clear answer came from the test. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.